Realistically, how can you expect all 7 billion people in the world with unique upbringings and experiences to cope with things in the exact same way?
It's building on my mind.
Welcome, builders of the internet. My name is Jessa, and today I wanted to talk about embracing emotions or welcoming in feelings, which is something that shows a lot in inspirational posts and with a lot of mental health events, such as mental health awareness days, where people put out the message of, it's okay not to be okay, or stuff that's along these lines. I wholeheartedly support the idea of letting people acknowledge their feelings and recognizing what's going on inside us, which I feel is a lot easier said than done. I have personally found this really hard to do, especially when it comes to acknowledging any negative emotions that I have. Have you ever had a situation where you felt hurt or upset by something, but you feel guilty or don't want to admit to these feelings because there seems to be so many worse things that other people are going through? And then, because of this, you might end up not really addressing the emotions at all. The thing is, negative emotions like anger, fear, or jealousy are just as much a part of us, and just as much a part of human nature in general, as the positive ones. It's never inherently bad to have emotions, in any shape or form, as they're pretty much signals from our body that help evaluate our experiences and pay attention to how events in our life are affecting us. But it's how we decide to deal with them that can have such a huge influence on our well-being. This isn't necessarily the case for everybody, but I know that for me, when I start bottling up or suppressing my emotions, it usually doesn't get rid of them. Instead, they just build up and up and up until it all spills over and I become a mess that can be a bit too much for other people to handle. There are various studies showing that holding back your feelings can lead to physical stress on the body, affecting blood pressure, memory, and self-esteem in the short term. In the long term, it might lead to problems with your memory, aggression, anxiety, and depression. But there are other physical effects on the body too, such as an increased risk of diabetes and heart disease. In 2013, a study from Harvard and the University of Rochester actually showed that bottling up emotions increases the chance of a premature death by over 30%, and the risk of being diagnosed with cancer increases by about 70% too. If you decide to let in your feelings, there are some stages that can be helpful in the process. I personally try and target what it is I'm feeling. For example, I might lose my temper and lash out because of the jealousy I feel if somebody that I'm in a relationship with starts getting closer with other people. So the key emotions here are anger and jealousy. This is relatively easy to identify, but it's this next stage that I often struggle with, and that is figuring out the root, or figuring out the cause of this emotion, which can be so hard to do in the moment. So it's okay to take a step back later when you've calmed down to figure this out. Just carrying on with the last example, say I'm displaying anger and jealousy on the outside, but at the heart of this, I'm probably feeling a lot of fear and insecurity. When I think about it with a more rational mindset, I don't really actually mind who people are friends with, but the thought of losing somebody who means a lot to me and the fear of being left behind and not cared about is driving me to lash out and present myself as a person that, quite frankly, I'm not proud of. There are so many healthy things that you can do when you've figured out the cause of your emotions, such as talking to somebody else about it. Maybe you'd like to reflect on your own or anything in between. There are many ways that people respond to having emotions, but figuring out the cause has been so helpful for me in cases where I didn't necessarily like how I dealt with it, or if I thought I overreacted. I found it's helpful to think, what were the steps that escalated me to that point? So next time I can try to recognize it and potentially stop it from happening again in the future. Some situations are pretty unavoidable, and you might not have the pleasure of seeing it coming, such as, say, grief over the loss of a loved one, or maybe over the loss of a meaningful relationship as well. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Everybody reacts to situations differently. It's presented in movies and TV shows as, having 7 stages or the 5 stages of grief. But realistically, how can you expect all 7 billion people in the world with unique upbringings and experiences to cope with things in the exact same way? Research has pointed out that there can be phases of grief, but there isn't necessarily a clear linear process for how someone resolves these feelings. Yes, there are some reactions that are more commonly displayed and accepted in our society, but the notion that people need X amount of time to deal with something just seems ridiculous to me. Don't get me wrong, I think that having models such as the 7 stages of grief can be really valuable, and it can help people understand what themselves or what other people are going through so that they can try to help. But if you've ever personally dealt with grief or any other negative emotions, it's so important to remember that it's your own journey and process. Just because you are experiencing something that is different to what these models show, it doesn't make your reaction strange or any less valid. For some people, it might be more of a cycle than having a clear beginning and end to the process, with having ups and downs throughout the rest of your life as you reflect upon this loss. But it's one of those things where realizing the cause of it and recognizing any patterns or behaviors that you might want to improve on or handle better, this is where we can find our strengths and grow as individuals. Our feelings about certain situations and attitudes around probably everything in life will develop as we experience more. Say, when we find out new information that helps us learn from our mistakes, or it helps put things in perspective. I think that something that many people struggle with is having too much pride to admit their wrongdoings in the past, and with this they fail to recognise any shortcomings or problematic reactions on their own part. I know for myself, I tend to have such a defensive response when people criticise me, and part of my knee-jerk reaction is to convince people that I am actually right. But the truth is, if I wasn't so resistant, and if I didn't have the mindset that every kind of criticism was a personal attack, then in a lot of circumstances, there are probably some genuinely insightful things that I can take away from and learn from it. Emotions are great for showing us an integral part of who we are, and probably helps indicate our values and morals in various situations, but it's not always the best to act upon them straight away. Giving ourselves time to process things and figure out, am I actually hurt by this or offended by this? I think a lot of people out there act on their impulses without giving too much thought or consideration to other perspectives, and are so ready to sit on this high horse as if we've never done anything wrong ourselves. I'm not saying I'm any better by any means, but I'm trying to think for myself a bit more, trying to be empathetic for what other people are going through, and trying not to make assumptions about people, because we don't know the whole story from everybody's point of view, as much as we like to pretend that we do. I took a bit of a detour there, but I guess the whole point of this was to point out that we all have feelings, and yeah, it's fine to acknowledge them because they are a part of us, but they can change all the time. It's so helpful to think about the root of these feelings and try and work through them with a more logical mindset if you want to genuinely make self-improvement and become a better person. That's all I have to say for now. I hope it helped build on your mind.
Thanks for watching this channel, it's building on my mind. Check out my other videos, but first hit the bell and comment, like, subscribe. Please, it really helps with the